For 20 long years, Marcus Thompson walked the same hallways of Sterling & Co., a towering corporate office in downtown Chicago. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and most employees headed home, Marcus began his shift. Dressed in a faded blue uniform with patches on the elbows, he pushed his squeaky mop cart from one end of the building to the other. To everyone at Sterling & Co., Marcus was just the janitor, a quiet man who cleaned up after them without saying much. But what no one realized was that this humble cleaner had secrets bigger than anyone could imagine. Marcus wasn't always a janitor. In fact, growing up on the south side of Chicago, he dreamed of something more. Life hadn't been kind to him or his family. His father worked 2 jobs but still struggled to put food on the table, while his mother sewed clothes late into the night to make ends meet. When Marcus turned 18, he enrolled in college hoping to break free from poverty. However, fate had different plans. After only a year, he dropped out to take care of his younger siblings when his parents fell ill. Jobs were hard to come by, and Marcus found himself doing odd tasks here and there, delivering packages, fixing broken furniture, even painting houses. It was during these tough times that an idea sparked in his mind: starting a cleaning service company. At first, it was small, a one-man operation where Marcus cleaned offices and homes by himself. Slowly, word spread about his dedication and attention to detail. People liked how thorough he was, leaving spaces spotless and fresh-smelling. As demand grew, Marcus hired a few workers, then a dozen, until his little venture became a full-fledged business. Apex Cleaning Solutions was born. Over time, it expanded across the city, earning contracts with big companies like Sterling & Co. Marcus had achieved success beyond his wildest dreams, yet he kept a low profile. He didn't flaunt his wealth or seek recognition. Instead, he chose to stay behind the scenes, letting others run the day-to-day operations. But Marcus had another reason for staying anonymous. He wanted to see the world through the eyes of those society often overlooked. By working undercover as a janitor at Sterling & Co., he could observe firsthand how people treated someone they deemed invisible. What he saw over the years disturbed him deeply. Executives would toss trash onto the floor, assuming it was his job to pick it up. Office parties excluded the cleaning staff, as if they weren't human beings worthy of respect. Worst of all, some employees mocked Marcus openly, making jokes about his uniform or referring to him as just the help. Despite the insults and indifference, Marcus never complained. He simply watched, listened, and remembered. Each slight fueled his determination to expose the truth someday, not just about himself, but also about the toxic culture thriving within Sterling & Co. For now, though, he remained patient, quietly biding his time. Little did anyone know, the unassuming janitor mopping their floors held the power to change everything. Every evening, as Marcus wheeled his mop cart through the polished hallways of Sterling & Co., he carried more than just cleaning supplies. Hidden beneath his calm exterior was a secret life that no one at the company could have guessed. To his coworkers and bosses, Marcus was simply the janitor, a quiet man who blended into the background, doing a job most people barely noticed. But behind the scenes, Marcus Thompson was the founder and CEO of Apex Cleaning Solutions, the very cleaning company contracted to service Sterling & Co. Marcus had carefully crafted his double life. He clocked in under the name Marcus Jones, using a fake ID and backstory to avoid drawing attention to himself. No one questioned the new janitor who showed up years ago. After all, why would they? The real Marcus lived far away from the fluorescent lights and sterile offices of Sterling & Co. His true identity was tied to boardroom meetings, business deals, and a growing empire. Yet every night, Marcus chose to trade his tailored suits for a worn uniform, swapping luxury for humility as he worked alongside the same employees who unknowingly relied on his services. What kept Marcus coming back wasn't just curiosity, it was a mission. Over the years, he'd seen how people treated those they considered beneath them. Executives left messes without a second thought, expecting someone else to clean up after them. Office celebrations excluded custodial staff, treating them like ghosts who didn't exist unless their work was needed. Conversations about promotions or raises rarely included the cleaning crew, even though they worked tirelessly to keep the building running smoothly. But it wasn't just neglect that bothered Marcus. It was the blatant disrespect. He remembered the time an executive spilled coffee on the floor, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "Well, better get that before someone slips." Another day, he overheard two employees laughing about how those janitors probably can't even read, while tossing trash near his cart instead of inside it. Each comment stung, but Marcus swallowed his pride. These moments weren't just personal insults, they were proof of a deeper problem. A culture of entitlement and prejudice that ran rampant through Sterling & Co. As the months turned into years, Marcus began documenting everything. He jotted down notes about rude remarks, discriminatory behavior, and unfair treatment of the cleaning staff. He saved emails showing how management ignored complaints from custodians about low pay and poor working conditions. Slowly, a picture emerged. A toxic environment where some employees felt superior simply because of their titles, while others were dismissed based on their roles. Marcus knew this wasn't unique to Sterling & Co. Similar attitudes existed everywhere. But here, in this building, he had front-row seats to the damage such mindsets caused. Despite the pain these experiences brought, Marcus refused to give up. He reminded himself why he started this journey: to understand inequality from the ground level and use his position to fight it. Every night, as he emptied trash bins and scrubbed floors, he imagined a future where things were different, a future where hard work earned respect, regardless of the job title, where kindness replaced arrogance and fairness triumphed over favoritism. For now, Marcus stayed silent, watching and waiting. But deep down, he knew the day would come when he'd reveal the truth, not just about who he really was, but also about the changes that needed to happen at Sterling & Co. Until then, he continued his nightly routine, mopping floors and gathering evidence, determined to make a difference when the time was right. Years after the whirlwind of events at Sterling & Co., Marcus Thompson found himself sitting on the porch of his lakeside home, sipping a cup of coffee as the sun dipped below the horizon. The water shimmered in hues of orange and pink, casting a serene glow over everything around him. It was moments like these that allowed Marcus to reflect, not just on where he had come from, but on how far he had traveled. His journey had been anything but ordinary, and yet it was deeply human. To the outside world, Marcus was a hero, a self-made millionaire who had risen from poverty to dismantle a toxic corporate empire. People admired his brilliance, his patience, and his unwavering commitment to justice. But to Marcus, none of those titles truly defined him. He saw himself simply as a man who refused to stay silent when faced with inequality. A man who believed that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, creating waves of change. As he sat there, memories washed over him. Memories of late nights spent mopping floors, listening to whispered conversations, and enduring insults that cut deeper than anyone realized. He remembered the faces of his coworkers, the ones who had laughed at him or ignored him, and also the few who had shown kindness, despite not knowing his true identity. Those experiences had taught him more than any business degree ever could. They had shown him the power of humility, the importance of empathy, and the value of staying grounded no matter how high you climbed. Marcus often thought about the people whose lives he had touched along the way. Rosa Alvarez, once dismissed as just a cleaner, now thrived in her role as facilities manager, mentoring others and advocating for fairness within the company. Young entrepreneurs supported by the Apex Foundation were building businesses that created jobs and strengthened communities. Even former executives at Sterling & Co., humbled by their past mistakes, had gone on to lead with integrity elsewhere. Each story reminded Marcus that real success wasn't measured by wealth or fame. It was measured by the positive impact you left behind. Yet Marcus knew he hadn't done it alone. His family had always been his anchor. their love and sacrifices fueling his determination to provide them with a better life. Friends who had stood by him during his darkest days had reminded him that he wasn't fighting this battle solo. And then there were the countless strangers who had reached out over the years, sharing how his story had inspired them to stand up against injustice in their own lives. Their courage gave Marcus hope that the fight for equality would continue long after he was gone. Looking back, Marcus realized that his greatest achievement wasn't exposing the truth about Sterling and Co. or becoming a symbol of resilience. It was proving that dignity and respect weren't privileges reserved for a select few. They were rights that belonged to everyone. By stepping into the spotlight, he had given voice to those who felt voiceless, showing them that they too deserved to be seen and heard. Though Marcus eventually stepped away from the public eye, choosing to spend his days quietly mentoring young leaders and supporting community projects, his legacy endured. Schools named scholarships after him. Streets bore plaques honoring his contributions. Books and documentaries chronicled his journey, ensuring that future generations would remember the janitor who changed the rules of the game. As the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle above the lake, Marcus took one last sip of his coffee. He smiled softly, thinking about all the lessons he had learned while pushing that squeaky mop cart through sterile hallways. Lessons about perseverance, compassion, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. To the world, he might have been a hero, but to himself, he was simply a man who had chosen to make a difference. One floor, one person, one moment at a time. It was a typical Monday evening when Marcus arrived at Sterling and Co., his mop cart in tow and his mind already focused on the tasks ahead. The office was quiet, save for the hum of computers left on overnight and the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights overhead. As he made his way to the supply closet, something caught his eye. A piece of paper taped haphazardly to the handle of his mop cart. At first glance, it looked like just another note, perhaps instructions from maintenance or a reminder about a special cleaning request. But as Marcus peeled it off and read the bold red letters scrawled across the page, his stomach sank. "Clean faster next time. We pay you enough." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. They weren't written out of frustration or urgency. They were meant to demean. And the handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to Andrew Sterling II, the newly appointed head of the company and son of its founder. Unlike his father, who had built Sterling and Co. on principles of hard work and integrity, Andrew was known for his arrogance and disregard for others. He cared more about cutting costs than fostering a respectful workplace, and his attitude toward employees reflected that. To Andrew, people like Marcus were expendable, just cogs in a machine designed to make him richer. Marcus stared at the note, his hands trembling slightly. This wasn't the first insult he'd endured during his 20 years at Sterling and Co., but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the casual cruelty of it, the assumption that Marcus didn't deserve basic decency because of his job title. Or maybe it was the fact that Andrew didn't even bother to sign his name, as if Marcus wouldn't recognize his handwriting anyway. Whatever it was, the note struck a nerve deep within Marcus, reopening wounds he tried to ignore for years. That night, as Marcus cleaned the office floors, memories flooded back, moments when he'd been dismissed, mocked, or ignored simply because of what he did for a living. He thought about the times executives walked past him without so much as a nod, as if he were invisible. He remembered overhearing conversations where coworkers joked about how those janitors probably don't even have families, or they're too dumb to do anything else. Each memory fueled a growing fire inside him, a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. By the time Marcus finished his shift, he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. For 2 decades, he had watched, listened, and documented the toxic culture at Sterling and Co. He had seen how some employees treated others with disdain, how kindness was often replaced by indifference, and how power corrupted those who wielded it carelessly. Marcus had always believed that exposing these truths would require patience and timing. But tonight, something shifted. The note wasn't just an insult. It was a symbol of everything wrong with the company. It was proof that change couldn't wait. As he locked up his mock cart and headed home, Marcus's mind raced with possibilities. He thought about the evidence he'd gathered over the years, the notes, emails, and observations that painted a clear picture of inequality and misconduct at Sterling & Co. He thought about the power he held not only as the owner of Apex Cleaning Solutions, but also as a major shareholder in the company itself. Most importantly, he thought about the people who deserved better. The custodial staff who worked tirelessly despite being treated as second-class citizens, the lower-level employees who feared speaking up, and the countless others who had been hurt by the same system. For 20 years, Marcus had played the role of the quiet janitor, blending into the shadows while observing the world around him. But now, it was time to step into the light. Enough was enough. As he walked out of the building that night, Marcus made a decision, one that would shake Sterling & Co. to its core and change the lives of everyone inside it forever. The next morning, instead of arriving in his usual janitorial uniform, Marcus Thompson walked into Sterling & Co. wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floors as he strode confidently toward the executive boardroom. Employees glanced up from their desks, puzzled by the unfamiliar figure moving with such authority. Was this a new client? A visiting consultant? No one could quite place him, but there was something about his presence that demanded attention. When Marcus reached the boardroom, he didn't knock or hesitate. He simply pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped inside. The room fell silent as every head turned to stare. Andrew Sterling II sat at the head of the table, mid-sentence in what appeared to be another self-important monologue. His mouth hung open for a moment before snapping shut, confusion written all over his face. "Can I help you?" he asked sharply, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Marcus didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a seat at the conference table, placing a sleek leather folder on the surface in front of him. Then, looking around the room at the stunned executives, he spoke in a calm but commanding voice. "Good morning," he began. "My name is Marcus Thompson. You may know me better as your janitor." The words hung in the air like thunderclouds, heavy and impossible to ignore. Gasps rippled through the room as realization dawned on everyone's faces. The man who had cleaned their offices for 20 years, the same man they'd dismissed as invisible, was now sitting among them, dressed impeccably and exuding an aura of quiet power. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Then whispers erupted. "Is this some kind of joke? How can this be real?" Before anyone could gather their thoughts, Marcus continued. "I'm not just your janitor," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I'm also the founder and CEO of Apex Cleaning Solutions, the company contracted to clean this building. And if you're wondering why I've chosen today to reveal myself, let me show you." With that, he opened the leather folder and pulled out a stack of documents. He slid one paper across the table to Andrew. It was a termination letter, addressed directly to him. "You're fired," Marcus stated bluntly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Shocked murmurs filled the room as Andrew sputtered, trying to find words. But Marcus wasn't done yet. He explained how he had spent 2 decades observing the toxic culture within Sterling & Co., documenting instances of discrimination, exploitation, and mismanagement. He revealed that he held significant shares in the company, giving him the leverage needed to enact sweeping changes. "I've seen how people here treat each other," Marcus said, his voice firm but tinged with sadness. "I've heard the jokes, the insults, the dismissive comments. I've watched good people work hard only to be ignored or mistreated because of their roles. And I've decided I can't let it continue." As Marcus laid out his evidence, emails showing unethical practices, notes detailing disrespectful behavior, financial records highlighting mismanagement, the room grew quieter. Even Andrew, who moments ago had been brimming with indignation, seemed to shrink under the weight of Marcus's revelations. What started as disbelief quickly turned into unease, then outright panic, as the executives realized the depth of Marcus's knowledge and his resolve. By the time Marcus finished speaking, the atmosphere in the boardroom had shifted entirely. Gone was the arrogance and entitlement that usually dominated these meetings. In its place was a palpable sense of accountability. Marcus had come prepared, armed not only with proof, but also with a plan. He announced immediate changes, promotions for deserving custodial staff, investigations into discriminatory practices, and a complete overhaul of leadership structures. And just like that, the man who had once mopped their floors had taken control of the very company that had underestimated him for so long. As Marcus stood to leave the boardroom, he paused at the door and looked back. "This isn't personal," he said. "It's about fairness. Remember that." Then, without another word, he walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces, and a company forever changed. In the weeks following Marcus's dramatic revelation, Sterling & Co. underwent a transformation unlike anything it had ever seen. The once rigid and hierarchical structure of the company began to crumble, replaced by a new culture rooted in respect, inclusivity, and fairness. Employees who had spent years feeling invisible suddenly found themselves at the center of attention, not as tokens, but as valued contributors to the organization. Marcus wasted no time putting his plans into action. First, he promoted several members of the custodial staff to managerial roles, recognizing their hard work and dedication over the years. Among them was Rosa Alvarez, a single mother who had been cleaning the offices for nearly a decade. Despite her tireless efforts, she had always been overlooked for advancement opportunities. Now, Rosa stood proudly in her new position as facilities manager, overseeing not only the cleaning crew, but also maintenance operations throughout the building. Her promotion sent a clear message: talent and commitment mattered more than titles or appearances. Middle management teams guilty of perpetuating toxic behaviors were either reassigned or let go entirely. In their place, Marcus hired leaders from diverse backgrounds, people who understood what it meant to be marginalized and were committed to creating a better workplace. These new managers implemented training programs focused on empathy, teamwork, and communication. Workshops encouraged employees to see each other as equals, regardless of their roles. Even small changes, like inviting custodial staff to join office celebrations or ensuring they received proper recognition during meetings, made a big difference. But Marcus didn't stop there. He introduced initiatives aimed at improving conditions for all employees, not just those in lower-level positions. Wage increases brought salaries closer to industry standards, while benefits packages were expanded to include health care, retirement plans, and paid family leave. A new grievance system allowed workers to report issues without fear of retaliation, ensuring that problems could be addressed quickly and fairly. Sustainability became a priority too, with Marcus pushing for eco-friendly practices like recycling programs and energy-efficient upgrades throughout the building. The ripple effects of these changes spread far beyond Sterling & Co.'s walls. News of Marcus's bold move went viral, sparking conversations nationwide about workplace inequality and corporate accountability. Journalists clamored for interviews, eager to hear the story of the janitor-turned-CEO who had dismantled a toxic empire. Social media lit up with hashtags like #BeLikeMarcus, inspiring others to challenge injustice wherever they encountered it. People marveled at how one man's courage had sparked such profound change, proving that even the quietest voices could make the loudest impact. Despite the spotlight, Marcus remained humble. He declined lucrative offers to write books or host TV shows, choosing instead to focus on his mission. To him, this wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about making life better for those who had been overlooked for too long. He often said, "Success isn't measured by how much money you make, but by how many lives you touch." As the months passed, the atmosphere at Sterling & Co. shifted dramatically. Employees who had once avoided eye contact with the cleaning staff now greeted them warmly, asking about their weekends or sharing lunchroom stories. Team projects included input from every department, fostering collaboration and mutual respect. For the first time in years, people felt proud to work there, not because of the company's name, but because of the values it now represented. Though Marcus eventually stepped back from daily operations, handing over leadership to trusted allies, his influence endured. He established the Apex Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting underserved communities through education, job training, and entrepreneurship programs. Through the foundation, Marcus hoped to inspire others to break free from cycles of poverty and discrimination, just as he had done decades earlier. By the end of the year, Sterling & Co. was unrecognizable from the company it had been before Marcus's intervention. What had once been a symbol of elitism and inequality was now celebrated as a model for ethical business practices. And though Marcus's days of mopping floors were behind him, his legacy lived on. In the smiles of newly empowered employees, the policies that prioritized fairness, and the belief that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, no matter their role. Marcus didn't waste a single moment after delivering his bombshell in the boardroom. With the termination letter sitting on the table in front of Andrew Sterling II, Marcus began outlining the sweeping changes he intended to implement immediately. The room was still buzzing with shock and disbelief, but Marcus's calm demeanor commanded attention. He wasn't there to negotiate or seek approval. He was there to make things right. First, Marcus addressed the custodial staff, many of whom had worked alongside him for years without realizing his true identity. "You've been treated unfairly," he said firmly. "But that ends today." He announced significant raises for everyone on the cleaning team, bringing their salaries up to match industry standards. In addition, he introduced full benefits packages, including health care, retirement plans, and paid time off, things they had long been denied under the previous management. For some, this meant no longer having to choose between paying rent and seeing a doctor when they were sick. For others, it meant finally being able to save for their children's futures. Next, Marcus turned his focus to leadership. Several members of middle management who had perpetuated toxic behaviors were reassigned or let go entirely. Some protested, claiming they hadn't done anything wrong, but Marcus countered with evidence from his years of documentation. Emails showing discriminatory remarks, notes detailing disrespectful treatment of employees, and reports of unethical practices. There was no room for excuses. Those guilty of fostering negativity within the company were swiftly removed, sending a clear message that accountability mattered. In their place, Marcus promoted individuals who embodied the values he wanted Sterling & Co. to represent. Rosa Alvarez, a dedicated cleaner who had worked tirelessly despite facing constant disrespect, was elevated to facilities manager. Her promotion sent ripples through the office, not only because she now held authority over people who once ignored her, but also because it symbolized a shift toward recognizing hard work and loyalty. Other deserving employees from various departments were similarly recognized and given opportunities to grow within the company. But Marcus didn't stop at restructuring leadership. He revamped the entire workplace culture. Training programs were introduced to educate employees about empathy, inclusivity, and teamwork. Workshops encourage open communication and collaboration across all levels of the organization. Gone were the days when executives could dismiss custodial staff as invisible or unimportant. Now, every employee, from entry-level cleaners to senior managers, was expected to treat one another with respect. Policies were put in place to ensure compliance, including anonymous reporting systems where workers could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Perhaps most impactful was Marcus's decision to include custodial staff in activities that had previously excluded them. Office parties, team lunches, and holiday celebrations now welcomed everyone equally. Employees who had never so much as exchanged pleasantries with the cleaning crew began striking up conversations, learning names, and discovering common interests. Slowly but surely, barriers began to break down, replaced by genuine connections and mutual respect. Outside the building, news of Marcus's actions spread like wildfire. Reporters camped outside Sterling & Co., eager to capture footage of the man who had flipped the corporate world upside down. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForJanitors and #FairnessAtWork as people praised Marcus for standing up against inequality. While some critics dismissed his actions as overly dramatic or self-serving, the overwhelming response was one of admiration and gratitude. Employees at other companies started demanding better treatment, inspired by Marcus's example. By the end of the week, the transformation at Sterling & Co. was undeniable. What had once been a rigid hierarchy, dominated by arrogance and entitlement, was now evolving into a model of fairness and inclusion. Morale soared as employees realized their voices mattered and their contributions were valued. Even skeptics couldn't deny the positive energy radiating through the halls, a stark contrast to the cold indifference that had defined the company for decades. As Marcus watched these changes unfold, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about punishing bad behavior or exposing hypocrisy. It was about creating a better future for everyone involved. By holding people accountable and elevating those who had been overlooked, Marcus proved that real change was possible. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, he knew the foundation had been laid for something extraordinary. As word of Marcus Thompson's bold actions spread, his story became a beacon of hope and inspiration for people across the country. News outlets couldn't get enough of the janitor-turned-CEO who had dismantled a toxic corporate culture and championed equality. Interviews poured in from every direction. Morning talk shows, podcasts, magazines, and even late-night television hosts clamored to feature him. Yet, despite the sudden fame, Marcus remained grounded, using his platform not to boast about his success, but to shine a light on issues that mattered most: workplace fairness, dignity for all, and the importance of treating people with respect. One of the most memorable moments came during an interview on a popular national news program. The host asked Marcus how it felt to go from being invisible to becoming one of the most talked-about figures in America. Marcus smiled thoughtfully before responding, "I wasn't invisible because I chose to be. I was invisible because people decided I didn't matter. But here's the thing. Everyone matters. Every person has value, no matter what job they do or where they come from." His words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about how society often judges individuals based on their titles rather than their character. The public response was overwhelming. People shared their own stories of feeling undervalued at work, tagging Marcus in social media posts and thanking him for giving them the courage to speak up. Hashtags like #EveryOnMatters and #RespectAtWork trended for weeks, uniting voices from all walks of life. Teachers, nurses, factory workers, and delivery drivers joined the chorus, celebrating Marcus as a symbol of resilience and justice. He became more than just a man. He became a movement. Marcus also used his newfound influence to advocate for systemic change beyond Sterling & Co. He partnered with labor unions and advocacy groups to push for stronger protections for low-wage workers. Together, they lobbied for legislation that would ensure fair wages, safe working conditions, and equal opportunities for advancement. Marcus traveled to state capitals and Washington, D.C., meeting with lawmakers and sharing his experiences. His testimony carried weight, not because of his wealth or status, but because of his authenticity. Lawmakers listened when he spoke about the struggles faced by millions of Americans trying to make ends meet while fighting against prejudice and inequality. To further his mission, Marcus launched the Apex Foundation, named after the cleaning company he had built from scratch. The foundation focused on empowering underserved communities through education and entrepreneurship. Scholarships were awarded to students from low-income families, enabling them to pursue degrees in fields like business, technology, and healthcare. Training programs taught essential skills like financial literacy, leadership, and conflict resolution, equipping participants with tools to build brighter futures. The foundation also provided grants to aspiring entrepreneurs, helping turn innovative ideas into thriving businesses. But perhaps the most impactful initiative was the Apex Mentorship Program. Marcus personally mentored dozens of young professionals, many of whom came from backgrounds similar to his own. He encouraged them to dream big, reminding them that obstacles could be overcome with determination and hard work. "Don't let anyone tell you that you're less than," he often said during mentoring sessions. "Your worth isn't defined by your circumstances. It's defined by your heart and your effort." Even as his influence grew, Marcus never lost sight of his roots. He continued visiting schools and community centers in Chicago's South Side, speaking to children about the power of perseverance and self-belief. During one such visit, a young boy raised his hand and asked, "Do you think I can be like you someday?" Marcus knelt down to meet the boy's gaze and replied, "You already are like me. You have the same potential, the same strength. All you need is to believe in yourself and never stop working toward your dreams." By the end of the year, Marcus's impact was undeniable. Not only had he transformed Sterling & Co. into a model of ethical leadership, but he had also ignited a nationwide conversation about dignity, respect, and opportunity for all. Though some critics dismissed him as an idealist, Marcus paid little attention to their skepticism. To him, the proof lay in the lives he had touched: the custodial staff now holding managerial roles, the students pursuing higher education, the entrepreneurs launching startups, and the countless others inspired to demand better treatment in their workplaces. Marcus knew the fight for equality wouldn't end overnight. There would always be challenges ahead. But as long as people believed in the possibility of change and worked together to create it, he was confident that progress would continue. And so,